here. I wanted to create an in-depth build guide to kind of show off that even while abilities as a whole are underperforming, the Kineticist is still an insanely strong character, and she's a blast to play. Get it? Because blast, like explode. Alright, let's get to the build. Your first ability is Pull. As the Kineticist, this is an incredibly important part of your kit. This is what allows you to give enemies a little kiss on the cheek before you launch them off into their new best friend. At ranks 2 and 3, you're picking up recharge speed and duration. Once you hit rank 4, you have to start choosing your talents. I never go for duration on Pull because it's not really needed. When you're holding an enemy, there is no duration. You can hold them infinitely if you want. It's not going to do you much good, but you can. I always go for radius for a couple of reasons. The first being, it lets you pick up 2 enemies instead of 1. Additionally, it increases the impact radius of the projectile. This is very important because this causes Pull to become a very forgiving skill. At rank 5, you have to choose between Crushing Grip, which causes enemies suspended by Pull to take damage, and Expose, which causes a defense debuff to enemies affected by Pull. This is a pretty easy choice considering you don't really leave enemies suspended. You chuck them around like little projectiles. You don't need the damage per second while they're floating. Expose, on the other hand, causes them to take 30% more damage when they give their friend a big ol' hug at high velocity. At rank 6, your options are Anti-Shields and Biotic Drain. Now, in single player, I'm a strong advocate of anti-shields. However, in the multiplayer for the Kineticist, her primary mechanic relies around keeping her shields up. If you lose your shields, you lose Ascension, which we'll cover in a little bit. But for the most part, you need Biotic Drain. Your next ability is Throw. This is the other half of your little Matchmaker set. After you've used Pull to give enemies a little tickle, you can use Throw to chuck them wherever you want. Now, if you only have Human Kineticist 1, I strongly advise leaving Throw with the base rank. It can do what it needs to do just fine. However, once you start getting more cards unlocked for the Kineticist and have more points beyond level 20, that's when you can start investing in Throw a little more freely. Your first couple of ranks are obviously going to be Recharge Speed and Damage and Force. Both pretty good upgrades. At rank 4, you have to choose between Damage and Force and Radius. While Radius normally is a great option, Damage and Force is significantly better on the Kineticist for a primary reason. Her core playstyle is built around launching dudes off the map and hitting dudes with dudes. The Damage and Force is a direct increase to that playstyle. When you pick up a guy and you smash him into his best friend, they're both going to take increased damage. Now, I don't suggest picking up rank 5 or 6 for Throw even once you've got enough points for it. You don't need duration because you don't need to use Throw as a primer. In Ascension, you have no cooldown, so you can just use Pull whenever you need. You don't need Recharge because, again, in Ascension, you have no cooldowns. At rank 6, Double Throw is a completely terrible skill. It looks really pretty, but 99% of the time in my experience, the second throw just whiffs and hits the buildings, hits the floors, hits anything except for enemies. It's just atrocious. Swift Detonation is a really good option, but again, you don't really need the recharge speed. The combo detonation damage is nice, but there's a better alternative to picking ranks 5 and 6 for this. We'll cover that in a second. Your third ability is Lance. Lance is going to be your primary skill for detonating targets that are shielded or armored. You don't want to detonate these targets with Throw. Most of Throw's damage comes from when the enemy collides with the environment. Since these enemies can't be moved, using Throw to detonate them is a significant loss to damage compared to if you had used Lance to detonate them. Now, Lance is the final skill that you're going to level. Throw is too valuable to the Kineticist playstyle to choose Lance first, in my opinion. Now, I go back and forth and I test them both, but I strongly prefer Throw over Lance to begin with. Once you unlock the last few cards, I strongly suggest leaving both at level 4. That way you get the best of both worlds, since, as we covered before, the final ranks of Throw are mostly based around cooldown and you don't really need them, and the final ranks of Lance are just as, kinda meh. But your first couple of ranks into Lance are going to be obviously Recharge Speed and Damage and Force. At rank 4, I'm sure you know what I'm going to say, Damage and Force. Radius is a great option in some instances, but for the most part, you're using Lance as a snipe. It's really great for detonating, like I said, those shielded and armored targets, and it's also really great for helping to pick up kills should you lose your Ascension. Next up is Biotic Ascension. This is the passive that makes the Kineticist. During Ascension, your abilities don't have a cooldown and instead consume shields. You also have 100 damage resistance, which effectively cuts your incoming damage in half. This is a pretty mandatory thing to learn how to maintain with the Kineticist. If you don't actually keep good uptime with Biotic Ascension, you end up just dying all the time because you have no damage resistance, and the Kineticist is an exceptionally fragile character. This mechanic is generally the reason that people either love her or hate her. They feel like she's really strong and you get to just sling powers all day, or they feel like she just dies all the time and she's not even worth playing. if you overspend, that's probably the most common problem that I see, is people kind of overspend and they don't pay attention to their shields, or they don't take cover when they need to. If you find that you're not enjoying the Kineticist, this is probably the reason why. You should work on managing your shields and knowing when you can spam your powers and when you have to be a little bit more conservative. If you overspend your abilities, you're effectively committing suicide, but it's also boring to never leave cover, so the more you play her, the more you'll learn how to kind of balance the two. Once you find that balance that works for you, that's when the Kineticist can really shine. At rank 1, you pick up the passive itself. At rank 2, you're picking up power, damage, and force, and at rank 3, it takes you one less charge to ascend. At rank 4, you have to choose between power damage and duration. As per usual with the Kineticist, I opt for power damage. You don't need the duration because it doesn't really help her very much. At rank 5, your options are Exposure and Combo Detonation. Exposure sounds like a really nice passive, defense debuff enemies from Biotics by 20%, but the thing is, you already have a 30% debuff on Pull, and any enemy that's a red bar on just health, you don't really need 50% extra damage to kill them. You're gonna kill them pretty quickly anyways, whereas Combo Detonation increases your AoE damage and gives you a little bit more oomph when you cause those fire detonations and those tech explosions. Now rank 6, this is really a personal preference one. I prefer Devastating Ascension because it increases your power, damage, and force while ascended. This gives you, obviously, more damage and causes more damage when you hit dudes with dudes. However, if you find it really difficult to stay in Ascension, or you're just learning the Kineticist, Efficient Ascension is a really great option. It takes one less charge to actually ascend, so you can get back into it quicker when you lose it, and your shields don't consume quite as much when you use your abilities. This is a really great option if you find it really difficult to stay in Ascension early on, but I suggest this as more of a training wheels kind of thing, because the Devastating Ascension is really it's really necessary for gold to make sure that you're contributing a solid amount of damage. The Kineticist's second passive is Barrier. This is arguably one of her most important skill lines. This helps you keep your Ascension as long as possible. At rank 1, you're picking up max shields, followed by shield regeneration, and then melee. At rank 4, you have to choose between maximum shields and shield regeneration. You don't need shield regeneration because you're going to be doing the regenerating with your skills. Between Pull and then Active Barrier at rank 6, you're going to be healing yourself, so you want to increase your max shields. At rank 5, you have to choose between max shields with an active biotic effect, or Barrier Drain, which gives you increased melee and shields restored on melee. I've thoroughly tested back and forth between these two, and I've found that Barrier Drain is complete trash on the Kineticist for many reasons. The first being, if you're in melee range, you're doing something wrong. The only time you want enemies close to you is when you're giving them a little kiss before you launch their ass into orbit. Biotic Link, on the other hand, gives you, it's almost like it heals you, because when you use Pull on an enemy while holding them, or whether you just cast it and forget, it increases your maximum shields by 40%. When it does this, it gives you that 40% maximum shields. When you detonate that target, or when they die from falling off the map, you lose the 40% maximum shields. However, you don't lose the shields that it gave you. So every time you activate Pull on an enemy and then remove the effect by detonating it or by killing them, you just healed yourself for a significant chunk of your shields. This skill is very important to constantly keeping your shields up. At rank 6, you have Active Barrier and Saving Barrier. Saving Barrier is great on almost every character, however it's complete trash on the Kineticist. It restores your shields to 100% when you get to low health. While that's great on everyone else, if you're at low health on the Kineticist, you're dead anyways. You want to keep your shields alive as much as possible, and if this effect kicks in, you've already lost your shields and that doesn't do anything for you keeping Ascension. Active Barrier, however, is extremely powerful on the Kineticist and actually causes her to support her team as well. Anytime you kill an enemy with a biotic, you restore shields of yourself and allies within 6 meters for 10%. This is a huge boon to the Kineticist. A significant chunk of your kills are going to be with biotics, from crashing enemies into each other and from just dropping them into the abyss off the edge of the map. So because of that, you want Active Barrier. The Kineticist is actually really versatile in what weapons you can run to make her efficient. My only suggestion is to make sure that you keep your power recharge as close to 0% as you possibly can. While Biotic Ascension does shortcut your cooldowns, you also have to keep in mind that she is a biotic character. She's not really designed to kill things with her weapons completely. So if you have like 2 crazy heavy weapons and you run a negative 100% recharge, you're going to find it really difficult to get back into Ascension when you lose it, and that ends up creating problems. my personal favorite weapon with the Kineticist is actually the Paw. I got this from the very first box that I opened, and I completely hated it, and every character and every time I've tried it since then, I have hated it to pieces. I thought it was a completely garbage weapon that was just had such a small clip, and I just did not like it. However, with that said, I tested it on the Kineticist recently to see how fast it primes enemies, and it's actually the fastest weapon that I can find at priming targets. Just a little bit under a second of firing, as long as you've got good aim, and the target will be primed with whatever ammo power you have. When you're in Ascension, that allows for massive damage output because you can just sit there and spam your incendiary explosions, your fire detonations, your tech explosions, all that stuff. The only thing that kind of comes with the Paw, though, is I would say you have to run the assault rifle magazine. If you don't run it, you're going to find yourself overheating really quickly, but otherwise it is definitely my favorite weapon. If you don't have the Paw, the Hurricane and the Equalizer are both really good substitutes. The Equalizer may actually be better for some people. It's just kind of a feel kind of thing. If you're pretty decent with the laser and you have the magazine mod for the Paw, I find that it works a little bit better than the Equalizer does, but I really love both to pieces. They are definitely really great weapons on the Kineticist. On the Kineticist, you can really get away with anything as long as it can prime targets quickly, or you can chunk off the shields. So weapons that are high rate of fire and semi-accurate, or snipers are pretty decent with her. If you have the Vanquisher 10 and Sniper Rifle Ultralight materials, you can actually run this and the Equalizer, and you'll still have 0% recharge. I would avoid heavy weapons and really close range weapons. You don't want to be close to enemies, you want to be able to strip their shields from a distance, or at least kind of a medium range, so that way you don't have to put yourself in too much risk of losing your shields. Now, for the equipment, if you don't have the Adaptive War Amp, you'd be completely fine running the Juggernaut Shield. Juggernaut Shield is the one that boosts your melee by 75% and increases your shields by 10%. The reason I run the Adaptive War Amp instead of the Juggernaut Shield, even though the War Amp is a little less than stellar, is even though it's less than stellar, you still get more use out of it than you do the Juggernaut Shield. As the Kineticist, you do not want to be in melee range. Melee range is extremely dangerous for you. So the 10% shields is really the only thing you're getting from it, and I prefer personally the 15% biotic damage over the shields, because that'll give your lance a little bit more punch when you detonate with it. As for boosters, the Kineticist actually isn't too demanding. As long as you run an ammo power, you are completely fine. My personal favorite is Disruptor, simply because when you use it with the high rate of fire weapons like the Paw and the Equalizer and the Hurricane, you end up priming enemies insanely quickly, and you also stun them very quickly. That stun is very crucial to keeping yourself alive and keeping your shields kind of untouched. You don't want enemies to damage your shields because you're using your shields for powers, as we discussed earlier. So my personal favorite is definitely Disruptor for the protection and the CC that it offers. But if you're trying to deal with berserkers and just in general the heavy armor targets, incendiary ammo is going to be your go-to. Incendiary also does a lot more damage to health because of the fire and then the burn over time, but I still find that Disruptor it works best on her. It just keeps her alive and keeps her in Ascension, which keeping you in Ascension longer means you have a lot better of an output kind of going on. Plus, another reason I don't really run Incendiary too often is because with the current Vanquisher meta, snipers tend to deal exceptionally well with armor because the way that armor scaling and armor penetration and all that kind of stuff works in this game. And since you pretty much always have at least 1 or 2 snipers on your team in any given gold game, you don't really have to deal with the armored targets as much yourself, as long as your team is kind of participating. So I find that Disruptor ammo it just really all around it just works best with her. If you want additional damage on your detonations, let's say you don't have a sniper and you're trying to deal with the berserkers and all that kind of stuff, you could run the incendiary ammo and then combine it with the biotic power amp, so that would boost up your lance to some pretty intense amounts of damage. And you just prime with the Paw to get the fire on them and immediately detonate with lance, and then you prime and then you detonate and you prime and you detonate. The Kineticist is actually really kind of well skilled at dealing with all sorts of situations. She's very versatile. Alright, now that we have the build and everything out of the way, let's go ahead and look at some gameplay. I picked up the Chosen and I went to throw him off the map, but then I realized that he had a canister with him. Whenever you pick up a canister, that generally means you have a free insta-kill on whatever you hit with it. So because of the area pull, it just happened to pick it up at the same time. So instead of whipping him off the map, I decided it would be better to find some enemies to throw him at. You can actually use the momentum of the pull or during a jump in order to toss enemies off the map without actually using your throw. You can do this to kind of preserve your shields a little bit when you need to. Right here, you actually see me dodging past the Hydra because I don't want the low ground against a Hydra. As a Kineticist, you have to be really aware of your enemies and their capabilities and your surroundings, or otherwise you're going to find that you're losing your shields a lot. And when you've got Ascension up, that's a big problem because then you have to start all over again. If you end up getting yourself in a bad position, look for a normal red bar enemy. You can use them as kind of your life support as you make your way out. The foundation of the Kineticist is really built on the kind of pull-through of synergy, so a lot of your gameplay is going to revolve around that. The most frequent little kind of setup that I do is I'll prime an enemy, and then I'll pick up that enemy with pull, and then I'll whip it at another one. That'll trigger a detonation of whatever type of prime you had. You can also kind of do it backwards, where you prime an enemy, and then you pick up a normal enemy, and you throw it at the primed target, and it'll still set off the same detonation. Doing this kind of lets you position detonations wherever you want and on specific enemies. I often do it with the dogs. I'll set up a primer on the dog and then I'll throw it at the anointed so that way I can strip a big old chunk of their shield. Alright guys, I think that's about all I have for you. I'm sure I forgot something and I'll be kicking myself later for it, but yeah, I put a ton of work and time into this and I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I definitely had a blast making it. She's my favorite character in the multiplayer, and I've accidentally leveled her to 23 times now, and I've respec'd her at least 30 times just tinkering around trying to figure out what's best. This guide was actually made in part with a kind of a really detailed written guide. If you haven't seen it yet, I'll leave a link in the description below. It'll take you straight to the original Reddit post, and you can go ahead and check that out if you want to see a little bit more of the logic behind some of my decisions and why I chose specific talents over others and why I wouldn't choose certain ones and all that kind of thing. If you enjoyed this guide and want to see more, let me know which characters you guys are interested in, because I definitely had a ton of fun making this, and I really want to do more, and I know there's not a whole lot of kind of creators for the Mass Effect Andromeda community yet, so yeah, I figure why not jump in. Anyways, I'll leave you guys with some more gameplay, and I'll catch you next time.
Member down. Just 3 hostiles remaining.